missed my intro, my name is Max Hanna. I'm one of the strategy directors here at Social Tree Global, and we're thrilled to have you join us today in the Engage Metaverse. We are literally going through a mass wave of technological revolution, whether that's in blockchain technology, whether it's in NFTs, whether it's in XR. There's so much innovation happening right now, and every industry is being revolutionized and being challenged, and the status quo is being pushed into a new direction. The finance sector is no exception. The financial services sector have got a lot of catching up to do with other industries, but it's an incredibly exciting time to be a marketer. We have some really amazing new tech at the power of our fingertips to engage people, to build communities in a way that we haven't done before. And in today's workshop, we're going to be talking about how you can kind of use the latest technology in the space. And I'm going to be taking you through 5 kind of tactics and strategies you should be thinking about when you're looking to enter the so-called metaverse. And then we're going to be followed next by a bid. Engage is going to be talking about strategies and tactics that you guys can deploy. We're also going to have a bit of networking at the end as well. So yeah, it should be a great event. So if you can take me to the next slide, please. So just if you're not familiar with Social Tree, just before we get into a bit about us, we work primarily in the financial services sector, working with brands around Web3 and social media to support campaigns. And we're doing some really exciting stuff in the space, pioneering some of the latest strategies and technologies such as the Engage platform. Next slide, please. So, we've all seen headlines around, whether it's LinkedIn, Twitter, the news. We've seen brands like JP Morgan make an announcement earlier on in the year, I think it was around February time, that they've entered the metaverse via Decentraland. HSBC came out and entered the metaverse via a platform called Sandbox, and actually went on to use the Engage platform. So HSBC are using the platform we're in today. Seems like a lot of financial service brands kind of are levitating towards Engage. And then we've seen brands like Citibank talking that the opportunity is, a potentially 10 trillion plus opportunity in the future. So, there's a lot of brands making their stake in the metaverse. A lot of it, let's be honest, is PR. There's a lot of brands thinking, right, we can see the opportunity. We want to make some PR. We want to be first mover advantage, and we want to have thought leadership in the space. So these announcements, have in big part been around generating PR. So there's the PR opportunity. So kind of my first point about how finance brands can enter the metaverse, first of all, is making a stake in the ground and saying, look, we need to be seen as thought leaders in the space. We need to be making moves, making announcements, and be seen as pioneers. And that's what, the leaders in the space are doing, like HSBC and JP Morgan. They're creating a thought leadership around this space. But there's a lot of controversy around the metaverse. Is the metaverse all, is it just a buzzword? And how real is the metaverse? If you really break down what is the metaverse and challenge, that term a bit, we're talking about, first we need to recognize Mark Zuckerberg and the rebrand to Meta. So that's when the metaverse really came into popular culture, when Mark Zuckerberg at the end of Q4 last year announced that Facebook are rebranding to Meta, and the idea of the metaverse, which is more or less virtual reality and Oculus. It's the idea you'll put headsets on and then you actually get transported to virtual worlds. And I know some of you today are experiencing this in a headset or through augmented reality glasses. So for him, the metaverse is more around that virtual reality, augmented reality play, a bit like Ready Player One, if you've seen it. The idea, you're going to put headsets on and jump into a metaverse, into a virtual world. And that is Mark Zuckerberg's definition of the metaverse. But people have started to talk about the metaverse for almost any revolution in communication. So it could be gaming, it could be NFTs, it could be blockchain. The metaverse really now is being used to describe all sorts of technology that's going on. So whether or not the term metaverse survives and becomes the ubiquitous term for the general direction of what we're moving is to be seen. I like the term Web3 myself. I think Web3 is a nice way to describe this next iteration of the internet. Either way, things like what goes into like Web3 and the metaverse are things like blockchain, are things like NFTs, are virtual reality, it is XR. These are the technology that's going to drive innovation in the next 10, 20, 30 years. So brands, whether or not you believe in the term metaverse or not, it's the technology underneath that brands need to be thinking about, you know, how they run campaigns through VR, blockchain, NFTs. This is really what is underpinning this buzzword. So if you can take me to the next slide, please. So let's first of all look at the metaverse and that term. And like I said, this really came about from Mark Zuckerberg's rebrand from Facebook to Meta, and it's the idea that people are going to put headsets on, they'll have that sense of presence. So if you're in the room today and you've got a VR headset on, you'll probably feel you should feel a great sense of presence. You know, I've got a headset on today and it really feels like you guys are in the room with me. It feels like I'm standing in this stage. It's really humanizing that connection, and it's way better than a Teams call. Like in Teams, I can't see people, I can't see their body language. In big organizations, you know, creating that human touch through VR can be really powerful. And that sense of presence is what things like Teams and Zooms do not have. And that's why I think VR is really, really exciting. And I do agree with Mark Zuckerberg that yes, presence is a big part of this. It's the idea of avatars. So we already have our avatars. We have an avatar on like Facebook, on Instagram, we have an avatar on LinkedIn. These digital avatars we already have, but it's the idea now you're going to have 3D avatars. Like now you're in Engage, you've probably set up an avatar to join here. Imagine you could have the same avatar in Engage and use that avatar in other worlds, like maybe it's like Decentraland or maybe it's in LinkedIn. Your avatar could sit also on the blockchain. It could be your avatar could be like an NFT sitting on the blockchain that's unique to you. It's your avatar, and as you go through these worlds, you can collect things like virtual goods, and your avatar is yours. You own it. You own the data around the avatar. So and again, we're talking about an evolution of that. You know, we already have avatars. It's not like we just woke up and this concept is here. It's been a slow, gradual evolution. Rarely do things happen overnight. And it's the idea of avatars, and also avatars around AI as well. You know, in the future, you will be able to speak to avatars that have probably some AI within as well around customer service. You can speak to an avatar, sort out some issues before you need to speak to a human representative. So the idea of a home space for Meta's vision is that you can have a home space where you can store your virtual goods, you can hang out there, invite friends. The idea you can teleport to other worlds from your home space, and it's interoperable between the worlds. You can take your same avatar, your same goods, and jump into two different worlds. Meta's play is obviously that the avatar probably will be through Meta. You'll create a profile with Meta for that avatar, and they'll probably, you know, follow you around and take your data. So that's their plan, but hopefully there'll be alternatives other than that. The idea of privacy and safety is what he talks about, which is quite rich coming from Mark, but hey-ho, that's what he's saying. And the idea of virtual goods. So we really believe here at Social Tree in blockchain NFTs. We think it's going to change everything, and it already is. It's a massive industry already. But also the idea of natural interfaces as well. So it's the idea of spatial web. Like, you know, we've got 2D experiences, reading websites. Now the idea you can actually go into an interface and it's going to feel more human, and you can actually walk through the space, and it's adding that 3D layer to everything. So that's Mark Zuckerberg's and Meta's vision of the metaverse. And like I said, really, let's be honest, it was this announcement and this vision that got the party started. But people are now talking about that the metaverse is gaming. It's like Fortnite. A lot of gamers would disagree with that. They would say, actually, Fortnite, it's not metaverse, it's just a game. You know, we're gamers. We don't believe in that. So you've got to be aware that the metaverse is a loaded term, and although it's present now, the mood around the term metaverse could change. You just got to think about what is the technology under that buzzword. and how can we use that in our organization? Because you only have to look at the numbers. All these are growing: blockchain, NFTs, VR, augmented reality. There's billions in the ecosystem to drive this technology forward. Next slide, please. So let's talk about the term Web3. So in terms of the first, and going back to the 5 strategies, the first strategy we talked about was PR. Like, you need to have a thought leadership, a stake in the ground. If you believe that the technology that we've mentioned is going to revolutionize the world, and that this is where the next billion-pound-dollar companies are going to be made, it's where the next wealth creation is going to happen. Your organization needs to be seen as a thought leader in that that section, in that space. So the second kind of strategy that you can also do, as well as making a stake in Metaverse, is also looking at Web3 as a more general term, and thinking about what is our Metaverse strategy, but what is our Web3 strategy as well. So I would hedge your communications efforts, and I would have a strategy around Metaverse, but I'd also have a strategy around Web3. And some of them overlap, but some of it is different in my opinion. So if you think about, Web 1, it was all about static pages. It was HTML. That was the first iteration of the internet, and you started to have things like e-commerce. And Web 1 was very much felt like an encyclopedia. You go on there, loads of information. It's all static pages. In Web 2, we started to have social, things like social media. We had apps. We had mobile access. Web 2 became a lot more social, and that's what really happened in Web 2. And now we're going to Web 3, which is more about, things like the blockchain. So having a ramp into the blockchain, and that rises to dApps, which are apps built on the blockchain. Things like NFTs, and also the Metaverse, which can be like VR, virtual reality, and augmented reality. So the Metaverse could be seen as one activity within a wider Web3 ecosystem. You're talking about artificial intelligence as well. So Web3, I think, can be talked about differently to the Metaverse, and you are talking about slightly different communications. I think Web3 probably has a bit longevity. I feel sensing a bit of backlash against the Metaverse coming online now. People kind of thinking, where is this so-called Metaverse? And obviously Meta do have a problem with their brand image. So I would be thinking about Web3 as a strategy. But part of that is definitely virtuality and augmented reality. It's the idea of turning 2D assets into 3D assets. So the second point around this is thinking about having a Web3 strategy inside your organization, understanding that the two terms Web3 and Metaverse can be different. Next slide, please. So and if we look at this, we are in that early adopter phase. Let's be honest, this is really early days. Everyone here, you are early to the party. You are very much, visionaries in your organization. There's always people in companies who are very conservative, and whenever a new announcement or a new bit of tech comes out, they kick back and be like, is this isn't real, and they are reluctant to try new things. They have a conservative mindset, and that's fine. You need conservative people. Conservative people are great. But there's also those innovators who are willing to try things, are willing to fail, to be brave, to be bold, and to try new things, and to ride a wave of innovation and see where it ends up. And that's what for joining today, that is the category that we all sit in. And we are in that early, definitely in that early adopter phase. Later, as we go on, we'll move into the early majority phase, late majority, laggards, people who catch the wave early. But if you want to future-proof your organization, the technology we're talking about here is really what you need to be on top of. And some of it's not going to work. Some of it may fizzle out. But if you keep with it, that's where the innovation and the magic happens. Next slide, please. And yeah, this is the equivalent of Pong. You're in this world today within Engage, but you've got to really see this as a proof of concept. This is not the finished product, and you can probably see that within these, there are bugs in these worlds. Let's face it, there are bugs. There's some stuff that can definitely be improved. But at this stage, see this as a proof of concept and have a medium to long term view. If this is where we are now, where does this go in 5 years? Well, headsets get lighter, they reach mainstream, the graphics in here get better, the way we access it gets easier. People have learned and got used to this sort of technology. it will, in 5 to 10 years time, the rate of innovation is going to really, really excel. So kind of brings more nicely to my third point, and third sort of strategy is all about willing to like test the market and test within your organization. So, you need to have a metaverse strategy, you need to have something around Web 3.0, but you also need to have a testing mentality, to test what's working, test it internally, and then you can kind of roll out. And that's what we're seeing with some, major brands is they're using platforms like Engage internally. They're meeting in these places, they're learning, they're gaining expertise, they're seeing how the market's evolving, and then they're going out to their customers with this tech. If you can bring me on to the next slide, please. And that brings me on to the fourth kind of strategy I would be looking at as a finance brand, and that is around NFTs. And now this is for only, some of the biggest innovators in finance, for the brave ones. But NFTs, in my opinion, are going to absolutely revolutionize everything. And a lot of people look at it as art and think, how on earth are people paying hundreds of thousands of pounds for bits of digital art? But really, the magic of NFTs, all it is a receipt on the blockchain. And you can look at some applications of how this could be really revolutionary. Look at the music industry as one example. In the past, 20, 30 years ago, if you were into music and you had a band, you'd be going to pubs and clubs and playing, to audiences. And then eventually, if you got well known and people were following you and showing up at your gigs, a record label would come and they'd give you, say, $500,000, and you would sign to that record label, give away 50% equity. And that's how a band would go to mass market, through a record label, and they'd often get stiffed in the deal as well, and the record label would come out as winners. Now musicians and artists are doing things differently. They're not going to gigs really. They're following what's happening on Instagram, on TikTok. Someone might be a rapper, for example, and have 2 million, 3 million, 10 million followers on TikTok. So what does that person do when their community is online? They can go and release NFTs. So they can say, look, I want some studio time. I'm going to release my first album, guys. And you, my fans, can have a stake in that. I'm going to release, say 1,000 NFTs at $200 each, or 10,000 NFTs at $2,000 each. And you can raise the money from your fans through an NFT. And then through the blockchain, you can program royalties. So you can say, okay, when my album goes live, I'm going to give X amount. Each NFT has X amount of royalty. So you have a stake in my future success as an artist. The fans who have followed that person also now have an NFT. They have a bit of artwork from the artist. Could be, some really cool artwork they can share online, and they can say, look, I've backed this artist, and that has collectability. Imagine, for example, you can look at, let's say, Ed Sheeran, for example. Ed Sheeran, really famous artist. What if Ed Sheeran came out and he first made it on YouTube, and you said, look, I really like Ed Sheeran. I buy the first NFT of Ed Sheeran's first album. And then he goes on to be like one of the biggest artists in history. I have a stake in all of that artist, in that album, or the future success, however they program the blockchain. But also I can show off online and be like, look, I've got the original Ed Sheeran NFT. You've probably all been sitting around conversations with friends who have been like, I spotted that band first, or I knew about that artist first. There's bragging rights to doing this. And those NFTs become collectible. You can then sell them on the secondary market. The original Ed Sheeran NFT could be worth loads on the secondary market because of the royalties and the value within that. But NFTs, again, they're just receipts on the blockchain. It could be housing. Eventually, as people get used to the blockchain, you could exchange houses on the blockchain, and it could speed up the whole transactions and automatically update, the contracts and all the stuff like that you have to do within the housing market. Now, we're a while off from that for sure, but the blockchain receipts on that can be literally anything. They can be art, they can be royalties, they can be fashion goods, for example. She might have they're doing loads around NFTs and collecting valuable fashion goods. And think about it, in this day and age, your digital avatars, everything. People are living their lives just for Instagram. They're going to places just to show off on Instagram. Your value is now your followers on channels like Instagram. It's not, an expensive watch or an expensive car. You're working at home most of the time. If you have, for example, a golden Rolex, whoever sees that? people now are paying for NFTs as a status symbol online. They might buy a Bored Ape just to show people online, look, I can afford a Bored Ape, they're £30,000. What people are buying is that prestige in your hierarchy in society. And that's why NFTs will be massive, because it's your tribalism, and that you will show the people what you're worth in the market through having just a simple Bored Ape, for example, because people know when they see that ape image that you must have money, and then your digital online persona becomes greater, and people will pay big money to be seen as influential. And in a digital world, that's the next evolution. Blockchain will change so much, and for everyone in finance, you're probably familiar with DeFi as well. There's yet to be a major financial services brand who's done something around NFTs, because there's a lot of compliance, there's a lot of hoops you have to go through. But I would say that NFTs are also land. So when JP Morgan bought land on Decentraland, that is an NFT. They would have done that through Ethereum and Mana. So to be fair, JP Morgan, HSBC, through Sandbox have done NFTs through land purchases, but an actual NFT campaign that's seeing the fashion brands has yet to be done. So the kind of fourth strategy I'll be looking at is, how do you deploy blockchain in your organization? That is the fourth thing that I would be looking at. And then in terms of the final the final point in this sort of fifth pillar really is just to think about community building. Like, at the heart of it, everything you do must be about community building. And what blockchain does is it really adds another layer of community. And it's a token that can sit on top of your community. And VR allows you to jump in these immersive worlds and have deeper connections with people. In large organizations, you can meet people across the globe, you can collaborate in these rooms. And as the technology gets better, we're going to be in a world where this becomes real. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed that presentation, and you've got some takeaways there. At the end of the event, I'll be in the networking lounge, so feel free to come up, ask me questions. If you disagree with anything, feel free to disagree. That we're still defining this as a species, really, what this all means. So thank you very much. Great, thanks everyone. I hope you found that useful, and a few claps there. Thanks for that, guys. So in this next session, me and Abid from Engage, we're going to do a bit of a Q&A just around the Metaverse, Engage platform, and also it'd be great to host some questions from you guys as well. Really keen to hear what you guys kind of think about everything that's been discussed today. And like I said, this is still really early days. We're all really early to the party here. We've definitely got a long way to go before we've truly reached mass adoption with this. But like I said in the presentation, you need to kind of see it as a proof of concept. So Abid, do you want to join me on stage over here?
Absolutely. Let me go ahead and switch off my 3D voice as well. Just bear with me. Thank you very much. Awesome. I think everybody should be able to hear me. I'm going to guess everyone will find it quite awkward if myself and Max just kind of stand here while everyone's sitting. So in real time, I can go ahead and grab Max and myself.
Thanks to the chair.
So there you are. Awesome. I feel a little high, but nonetheless, we'll make it work.
A nice power move there.
Exactly. That was my only intention. Well, firstly, I'd just like to say thank you so much for everyone to kind of come into this space to make your avatars. You all look wonderful. So many thanks for kind of getting all of that set up. And of course, coming in with plenty of time to kind of socialize and catch up and get familiar. So that's fantastic. We're going to be having a very open conversation here. So feel free to unmute yourselves and jump in with any conversations. Even though Max and I have these wonderfully heightened chairs, we're all part of this conversation. So Max, if you want to maybe guide this and throw out a question, I'd be more than happy to take them as we go along.
Yeah, great. Well, if you follow the Metaverse and Web3 space, you've probably seen a lot of players in the market. The people like Decentraland, Spatial. There's lots of people racing towards being, one of the sort of leading platforms in the Metaverse space. And Engage are one of those sort of pioneers. And it'd be really great, I think, for the audience to understand a bit about the Engage story, how it all started, how you kind of see yourselves in the market. Just give people a sense of the overall market and what you guys have been up to.
Absolutely, yeah. So we've been around for about 8 years, and in most contexts, that's quite a young company. In the kind of VR metaverse world, we're basically ancient. So we've had quite a head start, and as you can see, we've got quite a built out and stable platform. And it was founded by our two founders, David and Sandra Whelan, over in Waterford in Ireland. And the initial intention was, funnily enough, education. But as it expanded and the kind of lockdown occurred and everything happened with COVID, every company wanted to engage. They wanted to build company morale. They wanted to connect with their employees. And we had this kind of like Zoom spike. And then we had this like Zoom fatigue very quickly as well, where it got a bit, people felt a bit disenfranchised, shall we say. So we were having all types of weird and wonderful events within Engage. Companies themselves, they were using Engage for internal meetings, for socials, for workshops, and basically anything and everything they'd normally do in the physical or digital world. That's where the kind of VR, or I should say Engage, kind of fills that gap. And since then, or I guess since I joined, which is I guess slightly over 2 years ago, we had about kind of coming up to 30 people in terms of our headcount, and now we're near 120 people in about 2 years. So things fair to say are growing quite a bit. There's been a massive interest in the platform itself. And one of the things we really pride ourselves on, and it's not the sexiest or the most exciting thing, but we're very stable and we're a very professional platform. You'll notice the avatars, like everyone's dressed fairly well and can show a bit of character. But even within this perimeter, we want people to have, meaningful conversations that are mostly kind of education or business oriented, and for people to liaise and network in that particular manner. I think it's come up to about 160 plus clients, wide kind of variety. You'll notice HSBC have been doing some fantastic stuff. We did a product launch with BMW of like a Formula One and Formula E car, as well as their iX range. So car launches are always quite exciting. And then beyond that, I think we had the Chemical Brothers concert, which wasn't too long ago, and all of that is accessible on our YouTube channel. So you're more than welcome to look out for that. I hope that answered your question, Max.
Yeah, that's great. And for a lot of us thinking about when we're running these sort of campaigns and trying to build an ROI, because it's obviously really great to do stuff in the metaverse. But what are, in your obviously working 100 plus clients, what are some of the best examples of how companies have implemented this sort of technology, and what sort of ROI have they been able to get from running these sort of campaigns or building these experiences?
Yeah, I think from a kind of ROI perspective, there's one major thing, which is the kind of the carbon emissions of trying to host these events in the real world. Some of them are almost superfluous, like flying people around the world for potentially a 45-minute meeting or a day of a few sessions, whatever it might be, is really cumbersome, and it's not good for the planet. If I'm totally honest with you, it's not necessarily good for the individual either, because all of that time you're spending traveling, you're not really being that productive, and it's just quite an exhausting process altogether. So with some of the events, the amount of money we've been able to save for clients has been astronomical. We've had events where, quite frankly, almost kind of 5 different continents worth of people, I should say spread it over 5 different continents. I'm not sure how many tens of different countries have come in together and met in those spaces, sorry. And then even if you want to bring in, like, conceptually some ideas, if I want to bring in maybe the Formula One car, and then I want to make it transparent immediately, and I want each and every one of you to have your own individual Formula One car to kind of expand and handle that. That would be frankly impossible in the physical world, or it would be very, very expensive. I'm not sure how you'd even go about that. Again, if I want to take everybody to Paris right now, I can do that. If I'd like to take you into the head office of Engage in Waterford, I can do that again. So all of those things are just, at this point, we're not even using our imagination to kind of comprehend all of the real possibilities out there. So this is very much a two-way conversation. We want our clients to push us as far as possible and as hard as possible, and we'll make that a reality.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen a lot of work. I think it was, HSBC doing a lot around like internal comms and, and obviously big finance audience. So I don't know if there's any specific other use cases in finance that you've seen finance brands.
Absolutely, yeah.
Use.
I can maybe elaborate on the HSBC one, just because luckily myself and a good few of my colleagues, we've got kind of Alina, Alex, Mikhail, and Carol in the room, and we all worked with HSBC on that particular project. And we managed to set up this kind of expo hall, and it was all different types of time zones. And within those booths, there was a different learning point, I guess. And it was almost like a round robin system. So you'd kind of go ahead and learn about fintech or learn about this particular product and so forth. And it was just a really exciting experience, just because when we were bumping into people, it might have been like first thing in the morning for me. I'm like, oh, hey, nice to meet you. I'm from the Engage team. And it'd be, next thing you know, it's like 8 p.m. for someone over in India, or super early for somebody in New York and so forth. And it was just so dynamic. It was just so fluid. There's none of this awkwardness where you mentioned earlier, where you have like 32 boxes on a Zoom call. And then what happens is maybe just one or two people dominate those conversations. Everyone else is maybe muted. And it can be quite difficult to kind of jump in. You might feel like you're normally a bit introverted, or it can be a bit awkward or rude, but you'll notice straight away, like if I'm about to finish off a sentence, I'll probably like just nod my head and give you that tiny set of body language cues, I guess, for you to kind of understand the next steps. Whereas with Zoom, it can be quite opaque. But with finance in general, it's such an interesting market with VR, because VR is so visual, and finance sometimes can be, whether it's for retail investors or just even internally within the industry, it can be quite hard to comprehend a lot of that data and a lot of those, whether they're charts and so forth. So we can really bring things to life. And there's another client who I'm afraid I can't mention the name of just yet, but they've really visualized their data. And next thing you know, you're watching a presentation, and if you want to get a sense of scale of a particular index fund or a particular stock or whatever it might be, that's done there in real time with in kind of 3D space. And then you really kind of feel the gravity of what's being discussed here. Sometimes a spreadsheet can't do that, so that's why we can achieve those things here in Engage.
Nice. And kind of my final question before we kind of open up to the room, we're really keen to hear, what you guys think and any questions from you guys. But kind of final question is that, this technology isn't without its challenges. Like we are still in the early days. So what are some of the big challenges people should be aware of when they're building their own events or building their own platforms? What are some of the things people need to be aware of when they're getting into something like this, around the sort of challenges of implementing this sort of tech?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the main challenges is that you'll always work with people of different kind of experience with either technology or Engage or VR for that matter. So it's important to kind of manage that in a helpful way. So one thing you'll notice with Engage, and one thing I'm really proud about, is that everybody in this room has some kind of like a different type of device. So we're not a VR only platform where we're kind of multi-device. So I think we've got people with iPads, with MacBooks, with PCs, and some people with their hands with VR headsets, which is amazing. So it's about maybe catering to those groups, because maybe not every company just yet has a library of 1,000 headsets where people can kind of pop in and grab whatever they like. And then with the events themselves, try to maybe gradually go through that process. So you kind of have familiar, and then you have like aspirational, and then you have like absolute fantasy. So this is maybe somewhere in between. It's not often you have a meeting kind of on a floating kind of dome or floating kind of island where you've got some kind of proto San Francisco over there, and then you've maybe got some cliffs. But again, if I want to like switch things up in real time, again, I don't want to show you how it would take forever to normally do. If, for example, we wanted this meeting in space, then in a couple of seconds, you'll notice everything around you, at least the sky has we've gone right near the kind of Milky Way over there. So be conscious that you don't want to kind of overwhelm people when they first start. But one thing that we have over at Engage is our wonderful events team, who many are here with you. So we can basically look after you for your first, 1 or 2 events. And then after that, Engage is such an intuitive platform. You'll be kind of good to go by yourself. Just don't fear it, embrace it. And for the most part, you'll be able to do everything. And if you can't, our team will fill in those gaps for you.
Nice, great. Well, we'll open up to the floor. I don't know if there's any questions or any comments from anyone in the group today. Anything for Abid or myself?
Can I ask what if you were starting off from a VR perspective, what piece of hardware might be best? I think there's a few choices.
Yeah, great question.
Do any offer any sort of different functionality or whatever, or is it just purely personal preference?
Max, do you want to take that? Or
I think it's just personal preference. I think there's a few kind of headsets on the market. There's Oculus, which I'm on today. They're about £300. You've got Pico headsets, which are really good, and Pico actually recently got bought by TikTok. So they're good bit of kit, and they've got a lot of plans to develop it more. HTC have some with their sort of Vive offerings. So there's a wide variety of headsets to choose from. I personally enjoy these experiences a lot more with headsets myself. I don't get the same sense of presence if I'm using like a mobile phone, for example. So I definitely like to use headsets, but of course, it's still haven't reached mass adoption. But I think one really exciting thing is that Apple are going to release headsets as well. So they're going to be releasing their Apple VR headsets. When they do that, they have such a fan base. You can imagine millions, if not hundreds of millions of headsets being sold. Oculus and Meta just don't have the same brand power. I don't think they've sold, I think, like 10 million or so, but people aren't queuing up to buy Meta products, but they do for Apple. And that's when I think when Apple enter the race with their headsets, I think that will really move the needle.
Yeah. And the follow-on, sorry, I was just going to say,
sorry, go ahead.
Question, or the biggest sort of concern would be if you commit to one brand, then you're only going to have a narrow version of what you can then do or access with that brand.
I think you've raised an interesting point, Gary, about the metaverse in general. So if it is to be inclusive and it is to, have everybody, and just the word metaverse is so grand and all encompassing, it kind of then hinges on what type of metaverse do you end up with. Do you end up with maybe a particular metaverse that only supports a particular brand's headsets? That can itself be quite challenging and maybe a bit isolating. So I can say from Engage's perspective, we support pretty much all devices, regardless of brand. So if you've got a team and, the L&D team like HTC devices and the sales team like Oculus devices and so forth. And but just to kind of tag on to Max's point, in terms of like a blanket answer for everyone, the most easily accessible headset is the Quest 2. I think nowadays you can pick them. I think I saw one in a Tesco not too long ago. So your Currys, your John Lewis and so forth will definitely stock them. And it's just easily. I think everybody who's wearing a headset in this particular meeting is wearing a Quest 2. So it just goes to show you the power of how well they've pushed that out.
Is there a timeline on the Apple one? I know these things are always rumor, but is it?
Yeah, I think, there's a lot of rumors, a lot of speculation. I had heard it was towards the end of the year. It wouldn't surprise me if they timed it for like a Christmas, kind of like pre-Christmas launch. But they do push it back a lot. So I guess they just want to make it right. They do also have augmented reality glasses coming out, but they've been really quiet on the date for that. I think maybe the glasses are a bit further off. But I'm excited for Apple. Apple obviously have the App Store, so you can download loads of different tools like Engage, or whether you do spatial, or whether you decide to use. But I think the brand power of Apple is really exciting, and they've got way more, protection around like data privacy and stuff, and cookies as well. I think with like Oculus and Meta, they'll just try to track everything that you do. I think Apple have a bit more of integrity around the brand. So I'm really excited for Apple. I will be changing my Oculus for an Apple headset when they come out. That's my personal preference.
Okay, thanks.
No worries. If anyone else wants to unmute themselves, or if you like, maybe we can unmute everybody. I'm not sure. Or you're welcome to just raise your hand, even though it's not school. That might be easier. And I did want to kind of slightly expand on the point earlier about Engage as it is. As of a couple of months from now, we'll be having Engage Link, which will be the fully fledged metaverse. So as opposed to maybe following an email with a link, you'd instead just kind of appear in this open world, and you'll see Social Trees portal, and you'll know that you need to be there for 10:30 on a Friday or 11 o'clock on a Friday. You walk straight in, and you know all the right people and so forth. And that world will be interconnected. So you'll have an enterprise plaza, you'll have a creative plaza, you'll have an education plaza. And next thing you know, whether it's Apple or Amazon and so forth, they'll have their offices, and you can basically walk between offices. You can walk to a university, do a recruitment drive, go visit some of your other clients. It's going to be like a B2B metaverse full of professionals. So do keep an eye out for that. That will be called Engage Link. And yeah, you're welcome to connect with me and Max and on LinkedIn, and that content will be shared.
Great. Well, I think just kind of conscious of time, obviously, you know, been in here for an hour, but maybe a bit if we could go to the Enterprise Plaza, and we could perhaps take a few more questions there just to show the guys one more location.
Absolutely. Let me load that up for you. So this is going to be a bit of a sneak peek for a lot of you guys. This will be ready, as we said, in a couple of months, but essentially the foundation of the Engage Metaverse. So bear with me one moment. The screen will go dark